elected the Prophet in as their leader. At that point, he showed how secular he was when he was judging between different parties. If, for example, a person would come as a Jew, for example, he would ask him, would you like me to judge your case according to the law of Moses? Or would you prefer me to judge it according to the law of the Quran or the Sharia? Or would you prefer that I judge it according to the common rules that are commonly accepted in Arabia, common law? And they would choose.
And what about this idea about Islamic law being immutable, that it can't change, that it's completely rigid, so that the same law applies 1400 years ago and applies now? Is that true? Is that what Islamic law is really about?
I'm quite curious why anyone, and particularly Terry Jones and maybe the people with the same mindset, what did they want to change? Which law did they want changed? I mean, did they want the law, those laws changed which they consider harsh on women when there's no law, such laws which are there? He talks about that in his book, about the divine angel coming in the book of Revelation and saying nothing should be taken in or nothing should be taken out. Just look at the last 2,000 years. And I mean, he is an evangelical apostolic Christian. They are very staunch. They're very, they're very rigid in their position. Whereas other churches have had to learn to adapt to certain changes in society. Now, I'm not condoning, there is laws that shouldn't change. I mean, the laws concerning moral behavior, why should they change? They're there. They're there to be followed, which is for the betterment of society. I mean, Christian law, or the laws of the courts of this land and in every Western land, are based, if you go back to them, they're all based on Christian moral teaching. So, I mean, what laws does he want changed? He should give us some specifics if he wants us to...
Also, what right would we have to change laws coming from God? After all, if they believe that the laws in the Old Testament are from God, then, as I said before, they should believe they're from Jesus, because Jesus is God. So how dare they say, when Jesus said, do this, they say, well, we don't think that's right anymore, it's a curse now, we can't follow it anymore. What right do they have to do that?
He also makes this statement that he doesn't think that Islamic law is compatible with Western civilization. A very old idea that, there is no way that Islam can be reconciled with Western civilization.
I'm a convert to Islam. Okay? I live in the West. Okay, I've lived in the East, but I live in the West. I'm practicing it. It's suiting it. It's
highly compatible.
Yeah, it's suiting me in every respect.
And of course, Islam tells us very specifically to follow the secular laws of whichever country that we live in.
Precisely. Yes, we are told specifically in the Quran to do that, and that's what you actually find. Muslims are, in the crushing majority, law-abiding citizens of any country, wherever they live, be it Muslim country or non-Muslim country. This is how good people behave, and this is taught to us in the Quran.
And you won't find that in any other book.
It's very interesting that you mentioned a little bit earlier Islam's attitude to women, and Terry Jones has written in his point number 7 what he believes to be Islam's attitude towards women. And he says, the attitude towards women in Islam as inferior possessions of men has led to countless cases of mistreatment and abuse for which Muslim men receive little or no punishment, and in many cases are encouraged to commit such acts and are even praised for them. And he says that this is a direct fruit of the teachings of the Quran. Now, I don't recognize this idea at all, but of course probably the best person to answer this would be someone with a degree of insight, and now we're able to watch Mahad Dabbous, who is a scholar of comparative religion, a translator and a writer on the rights of women in Islam, as well as listen to Sister Aisha, who's going to give us a personal viewpoint as a recent convert to Islam.
As far as we know, that Islam has considered women and men as equal in all aspects, in spiritual and in worldly matters, in everywhere, in every aspect they are equal. And furthermore, we know also that the Islam has given the rights to women that were never heard of before, and even today they are unparalleled in the world. For example, we know that the Holy Quran has taught that men should give women the financial support, the financial provisions, and the women are not responsible for the financial support of the family. It is the men's full responsibility to do this. Another thing in marriage, for example, the consent of the lady, the girl, is a condition for the marriage to take place. And the good behavior of her husband also is a condition for the marriage to continue. If this does not happen, she has the right to divorce. Women in Islam were given the right of inheritance. They were given the right to make a complaint or a legal complaint in the court. All this was not given to women in the rest of the world. It was not, these were not rights for the women until the 20th century. Even in Europe, this happened only in the 20th century.
You see, in my opinion, I feel, who decides if a woman is free or if she is oppressed? You know, if a woman chooses to display her beauty, why does that make her any more free and independent than a woman who chooses to cover her beauty with a scarf or a veil? I really wish that people would reflect a lot more and think about and find out why we wear a scarf, and try and understand that actually we see scarf as something that represents dignity and honor and respect. I choose to wear my scarf, and I've never felt in any way that my scarf restricts my freedom or independence. Quite the opposite, actually, because before I converted to Islam, I used to really struggle with peer pressure, always trying to fit in and being popular. Once I converted to Islam and I started wearing a scarf, I realized those are all just outer things, and I really wanted to concentrate on my inner personality and the qualities that I could have to be a better person.
How can anyone say that the Quran, the Holy Quran, declares that women are inferior to men, when the Holy Quran itself is always and repeatedly saying in its verses that women and men are equal in the eyes of God? From the spiritual side, women and men can reach all the levels, all the spiritual levels. They can attain to the same spiritual stations. So how can anyone say that women are inferior to men in this way? The point is, there are some physical differences between men and women. And because of this, there are subtle differences in the teachings concerning men and the teachings concerning women in the Holy Quran. And this is understood because each one has a different role in the society. And we can't say that men are better than women or women are inferior to men in any way. Because when we look at the family, for example, the man is like the head of the family, and the woman is like the heart of the family. So if we look at this, we know that the body can neither live without a head or live without a heart. So both are, the roles of both husband and wife are needed for the welfare of the whole family, of the body of this family.
One day, a man came by and he was staring at me, and he kept staring. And then he came after a while and he said, "You poor thing, is your husband forcing you to wear a scarf and to coat?" And I said to him, "No, actually, I'm not married yet." And then he said, "Are your parents forcing you to do it?" And I said, "No, actually, I'm a convert, so my parents are not Muslims." And then he looked at me and he was puzzled, and he said, "So why are you doing it?" And that's exactly what I mean. The Western society often thinks, they see a Muslim woman, they think they're oppressed, you know, and somebody must have forced them to do it. But if we ask the majority of Muslim women, they would all say that they happily wear their scarf, and they wear it because they're proud wearing it, and they still play their role in society.
Moving on to points 7 and 8 in Terry Jones' criticism of Islam, we see that he claims that Islam is not compatible with democracy or human rights, and also he claims that apostasy is punishable with death. Now, we're very lucky to be joined by our legal correspondent, Qudsi Rashid, to help us to look in depth at Islamic law and see whether or not these statements are in fact correct. Thank you for joining us, Qudsi. And the first question, Qudsi, is to do with human rights. And does Islam actually support the concept of human rights?
Jazakallah, Hamad. Of course it does. I think there's no question about that. And a simple and brief overview of the principles of Islam would show this. Islam, just like every revealed religion that preceded it, emphasizes the importance of the respect and duties towards all of God's creatures. That particular relationship embeds human rights into the very fabric and core of Islam. If you look at the rights that are contained, for example, in modern-day international law, Islam respects those rights exactly. The right to life, liberty, the rights of persons and property, the right to freedom of religion and conscience, equality and non-discrimination, all these principles are rooted within Islam's teachings. And the interesting thing is that these rights that are now recognized in modern international law have only been around in the international domain for about 60 or 70 years since the end of the Second World War in 1945, whereas these very same rights have been there, found in the Holy Koran over 1400 years ago. And rights that are still being fought for today in many parts of the world are also there to be found within Islam. Socio-economic rights, for example, which are still being fought for in countries like the United States, the right to welfare and food and an adequate standard of living, these are all there in Islam, as are environmental rights and rights for animals. All of these rights are there contained in Islam.
Many people think that Islam is incompatible with the idea of freedom of religion, that Islam doesn't allow people to practice their own conscience as far as religion is concerned. But is this true?
Most certainly isn't true, Dr. Khan. In Islam, the right to practice one's own religion is definitely protected. In the Holy Quran, for example, it says in chapter 2, verse 257, "There is no compulsion in religion. Surely the right way has become manifest from error." What can clearly be seen from this verse is that the right to choose one's own path is there left up to the individual choice. Dr. Jones talks about the fact that in Islam there is no concept of moral agency or of individual's choice. What this verse clearly shows is the complete opposite. It allows people to choose what is right for them. It goes on in the Quran and says in chapter 10, verse 100, and it asks rhetorically, "Wilt thou then force people to become believers?" This rhetorical device shows the fact that matters of belief, matters of religion, they're all matters of the heart and the soul. These are not things that can be enforced by the sword or by any method of force. And so people are left up to their own judgment. And in Surah Al-Kafirun, chapter 109 of the Holy Quran, it says, "Say, O ye who disbelieve, I worship not as you worship, nor do you worship as I worship. Nor do I worship that which you worship, nor do you worship him whom I worship. For you, your religion, and for me, my religion. What better evidence can there be of freedom of religion? For you, your religion."